Hey folks, Dennis here with Las Vegas Worm Farm and the Living Soul community, and it's time for our worm topic of the week. This week, what we're going to be talking about is something that is I'm starting to see on social media all over the place, right? And that's gardeners just quitting. They're just giving up. Like it's July 21st, right? And gardeners are just like, yeah, I think I'm done, you know, and it frustrates me. And so this is something that I want to talk about. And I know all of us have kind of been there, right? So think about this. Have you ever added compost, worm castings, fertilizers, mulch, extract, uh, different soil products, right? Like this, that, and the other to your soil. And you were like, okay, the plant's struggling. I added all this stuff. Let's give it some time. We'll come back. So you walk away. You come back tomorrow, right? And you look and you're like, all right, well, I added all that stuff yesterday, but like, I don't see anything. The leaves are still yellow. The plant's still kind of droopy. The garden just, nothing's looking good. So you say, okay, this didn't work, right? It just didn't work. And then what happens? And then you become discouraged, right? Your plant probably ends up dying anyway. Uh, or you decide to go try something else. So you go back to the store. Maybe you talk to an associate, right? Or somebody. If you're going to Walmart or Home Depot or Lowe's, you're probably not talking to anybody. But if you go to a local nursery, maybe you can talk to somebody. You talk to them, you say, hey, my plant's dying. I don't really know what's going on. And they're like, oh, what's going on? And then, you tell them, and then they give you a recommendation. And then you're like, okay, you take that, you buy it, and then you use it. And then you come back and you're like, I used it. You wait a couple of days, you come back and you're like, it didn't work. Snake oil, right? But here's the thing. Gardening's not like a light switch. You can't just toss things out there or flip a switch on and then get instant results, right? Gardening, especially if you're doing a living soil organic system, right? A living soil using the soil food web or doing a living soil system, organic system, whatever you want to call it, not using chemicals, right? If you're doing that type of system, it needs time, right? It just doesn't happen that fast. It's got to take a little bit of time. So let me give you an example. Imagine that you have a plant that's been stressed out for a few weeks, right? The soil's drying out super quick, right? The plant's looking weak. The leaves are all like burnt on the edges and brown. And then you go add, all the things that I tell you to: worm castings, compost, and mulch, right? And then those are all good choices because I usually recommend those, right? But the old leaves, they will usually, more than likely, if they're brown and crispy, they will not turn green again. They will not regrow. The damage that's been done to the roots or the stems of those plants, right? Like you've seen the stems that die back and turn brown. It's not recovering from that, right? The things that have been damaged have already been damaged. The soil needs time, right? The soil may be dry, but it has to get, you have to give it a little bit of time to hold more moisture, right? It's not just going to happen immediately. It's kind of like hydrophobic soil, right? Like everybody's dealt with this, right? You've got a hydrophobic pot, right? And it just won't hold water. And you're like, I don't understand what's going on here. Well, what you got to do is you got to dunk that in a bigger bucket full of water and you let it soak. It takes time. So if you're doing this in a garden bed, it's going to take more time, right? Those microbes need time to reactivate. Activate, wake up. Some of them go dormant, right? Some of them have to wake up, and some of them have just disappeared altogether. So if there are, babies or dormant ones left behind, they have to be able to eat and multiply before they can do anything. This again takes time. So you can make all the good choice, all the right choices in the right orders and do them all at the same time and still not get the results you're looking for because it takes time. Patience is the game here, right? But here's the thing. By the time we finish talking with this, you'll understand three simple things. The first thing you'll understand is why gardeners usually quit too early. The second thing you'll understand is what is actually happening in the soil and what's actually going to happen with your plants, right? Go to the meeting tab. Sorry, folks. Looks like it's trying to kick me out. I'm going to stay in the call. All right. Let's get back to it. All right. So by the end of this, what you're going to understand are three things. The first, you'll understand why gardeners usually quit way too early. The second thing you'll understand is what actually happens inside of the soil and the plant before you see anything actually happen, as in like visually with your eyes, right? And then the last thing is you'll know whether your garden is moving in the right direction or not. You will not need to guess. This is going to be a simple process that you can follow, that anybody can follow. Doesn't matter if you're a beginner or you're experienced. So the plan going forward here is we're going to cover 5 things. Why the gardener, expects fast results. Why plants often respond slowly. Why the old damage may not disappear. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. The fourth thing we'll talk about is how too many changes can make the problem worse. And then the final thing is we're going to talk about something I call OMAR, which is basically observe, act, measure, adjust, and then repeat, which kind of makes it simple. Every time I go out into the garden, I just scream, OMAR, right? And usually that fixes things. Sometimes. I have to tell myself what OMAR is, but I always blame OMAR. All right, so why do we expect, or better yet, we live in a world that's just fast paced, right? I mean, at the push of the button, things happen. You turn the knob on the faucet, water comes out, right? You send a text message, it gets to your wife, and she tells you exactly where the ketchup is, right? You order something, it arrives immediately at your house, especially if you use an Amazon Prime. I mean, nowadays, have y'all seen the new function? You can get it in like 3 hours or something like that, like the same day. Pretty fancy, right? So we live in a society right now that is, if you have a problem, it can be fixed almost instantaneously, right? And I think because everything around us is like that, sometimes this gets ingrained to us in our garden, and we think that these things will just work the same way in the garden. We add a product, we get a fast result. We add water, the leaves immediately start to stand up. We add worm castings, the leaves go from yellow to green, right? We add extract, we get brand new growth in the morning. Like, these are the types of things that sometimes we can get into a rut. And plants, they work on biological time, like on soil biology or stuff like that, right? They work on a different time frame. They don't work on the same things that we need, which means that in the same time frame that we do, right? Which means that they need more time. Mother Nature controls that clock, right? She decides when things occur and when things happen, like, we don't have that control. So I guess the best way I can do this is, or I can kind of explain this, is a person, they can't eat one meal and just become healthy all of a sudden, right? Like, you can't just lift one weight and then all of a sudden just build muscle. Like, gardening works the same way. You can't just do one thing, right, and then immediately expect the result to occur. Like, it doesn't happen that way. The action that you do starts the process, right? But that process needs time, just like healthy eating, just like exercising, building muscle, all of those things. The plants are no different. It starts the process, but then we have to give it time to do its thing. So let's say you do add compost to your soil, right? Like, let's say that is the solution that you're going to go for, right? Well, did you know that compost is just not magically going to, turn into food for your plants? It's not. There's a process in place. First, it's got to become part of the surrounding soil, right? It's got to become one with the soil, right? And then it's probably going to start holding on to some more moisture. After that, it's going to probably turn into food for the microorganisms and a home for the microorganisms. And then those microorganisms are going to multiply, right? And then they're going to break down that organic material. And that organic material, once they start breaking it down, turns into nutrients. And those nutrients are the ones that can be used by your plants. But here's the thing, maybe you let the soil dry out too much already. So now those roots are damaged because they're too dry. So even though you have all of these nutrients that are cycling in the soil, right, you have roots now that are damaged that can't uptake all the nutrients that are being created. So all of this is what's happening underneath the soil, things that we cannot see with our eyes, right? So when we go to inspect the plant and we're and it's been a few days and we're not seeing any results, well, there's a lot of damage. There's a lot of things that are occurring underneath the soil that have to happen before the plant can even do that, before the plant can put on new leaves, before the plant can fix the stem, put on more flowers, right? Like things have been broken and they need to be put back into place. The same thing happens if you're using worm castings, right? Worm castings have organic material in them. They have some nutrients. They have very many billions of beneficial microorganisms, right? But all of those things have to become part of the system first. And if the roots aren't available to uptake any of that, then the plant is not going to be able to, do anything with it. It takes time. The plant needs energy, right? The plant needs nutrients, and it takes time for the plant to be able to accomplish this. It's not just going to happen over a couple of days. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it just doesn't. And that goes into so many different factors, right? Which we have too many to cover. But yeah, there's a bunch of different factors that go into that. So you have to give it time for it to be able to repair and heal itself, especially if we're talking about bigger trees, right? Like smaller plants, sometimes they can bounce back faster, right? But they're also more susceptible, right? Where the bigger ones, they don't exhibit everything right away. It takes a little while to show up, but then the bounce back is super, super slow. So it's kind of like kids and old people, right? Kids, like they'll bounce back really quick. So they break their leg or break their arm, not a big deal, but like it's really easy for them to break a leg or break an arm, right? But like when you're older, those bones are, no, that's not a good example because bones are brittle when you get older. But the rehabilitation portion of it, right? It takes longer in an older person to be able to, fix those things. And the same thing goes for kind of like your plants, right? The older they are, it takes a little bit more time. There's more mass there. There's more things that have to occur. When they're younger, they tend to bounce back a little quicker, but they're also a little more sensitive. So you got to kind of take that into consideration. And you got to remember that all of this takes time, happens over time. One thing also that I like to kind of focus on is that once you see damage, like more than likely, that's not going to go away, right? So if you've got a leaf that's crispy, like it's probably not going to get green again. Now, if it's yellow, there's a possibility that it might turn green again. It depends on what the damage to the leaf, right, actually is. But sometimes those leaves, they turn yellow and then they'll just fall off the plant. Like there is no repair that occurs there. And the same thing with your stems, right? Like if your stems, like they turn black, I don't know if you've ever seen that, y'all have ever seen that, but they'll turn black. There's no coming back from that. Like that's just it. The plant now has to kind of cut that area off, right? It dies back and then it has to be like, okay, now I have to start all over with a new area. So that takes more energy, right? More time to be able to build those new things, right? And then when it does, sometimes it goes in places that we don't even look, right? Like sometimes I've seen bushes, right? Bigger bushes where everything has kind of died back. And I'm like, it's been a little while. There should be new growth. And where it's actually growing is from like the back side of the trunk, right? Like I've got new growth coming out of the top, but it's not coming out of any of the other bigger branches or stems or the other part of the trunk. So sometimes the new growth occurs in places that we don't even think to look at. So we got to look at everything. But sometimes when it dies back, that's just it. What I don't want to happen Or something that we need to remember is that when we look at certain plants, sometimes it's a fear factor, right? Like we get scared. And that's because we've probably invested some time, money, effort into that specific plant. So, in my perfect example is I've tried to grow kiwis. Yeah, I know, here in Las Vegas, and yeah, it's not going to happen, right? And I put a lot of TLC, quite a bit of money into trying to buy different varieties to get them to grow, and it's just I struggle. It's not one of those things that work, right? And it makes me scared. Basically, I get fearful because I see this plant that I've invested or I want to grow, right, because it means something to me, and all of a sudden the leaves start turning brown and I'm like, oh my god, oh, what do I have to do here? What's going on? Is it fertilizer? Do I need to add compost? And what a lot of people do is they do just that. They see this and then they start panicking, so they go get the water hose, they add more water, they add more fertilizer, they add more compost, they add more worm castings, they add more extract, they add more shade, or they add more sun. They move the plant from one location to the other. They cover the soil up with, they take the old mulch off, they put new mulch on, right? They're doing all of this. And here's the thing, all of those things sometimes make your plant better, you know, sometimes. But here's the thing, you don't know what actually made it better. And on the flip side, sometimes it makes it worse. Sometimes the plant, you know, takes a downturn and gets even worse. More leaves fall off, you know, more crispier branches. And then because you've done all these things, you have no idea what exacerbated that problem, what made that problem worse, right? Too many changes all at once creates a massive amount of confusion. And that can ultimately hurt your plant, right? So a gardener that looks at a plant that's wilted may think that it needs more water, but it might already be swimming in water, right? So why would you add more water? A plant that has damaged roots might not be able to absorb all of the nutrients that you're adding into the soil. So why add those nutrients, right? It doesn't help the plant. So when we act quickly and we do a bunch of things all at once, it looks like we're caring and we're trying to be careful, but it ends up being more detrimental to the plant. So choose one thing, one useful action, and then watch for the responses, right? There's a difference between doing nothing and then doing everything, right? And this is kind of where we talk about Omar, right? We want to do something, but we want to do the right thing, right? And this is, I think, where the education in the gardening community probably lacks a little bit, right? And so Omar helps me figure this out. So the first step in Omar is going to be observe, right? We're going to go out there and we're going to look. We're going to see. We're going to look at it. We're going to, you know, what's actually going on, what's happening, right? We're not going to immediately be like, what products do I need? Post a picture on Facebook and be like, what's going on with my plant, or Reddit, right? Like, that's not what we're going to do. We're just going to ask simple questions, right? We're going to observe the plant and the area that it's in. So I go through a few questions and I usually start with, is the soil wet or dry? You can use the finger test. I think I've shown you guys how to do that, right? Everybody's got at least 10 digits that you can use to do a moisture test. Are the leaves old? Is there damage to old leaves or is it new leaves? Is the plant growing anything new at all? Stems, leaves, flowers, fruit? Is anything growing? Is the plant wilting all day, or is it just because it's high noon or late in the afternoon? Then we'll look at things like, where's the closest emitter, right? How much water is this plant getting? Is the soil covered? Is there mulch on it, on the soil at all? Right? When's the last time we added organic material to the soil? When's the last time we added compost? Has anything changed recently, right? Did we adjust the watering schedule? And then The goal, and then the goal of all of this is to understand what our starting point is going to be. You can't know whether something's going to improve or not if you don't know where to start. So the next thing I usually do is I'll take a picture. I'll stand in, I'll step back, take a picture of the plant or a mental picture, right? And then if I have something to write down, I'll usually journal. I'm not a journal guy, but I will take pictures. But some people like to journal and they like to write down exactly what's going on with the plant, when it occurred, right? And that is super important when we're doing the observation portion of it, because then we can kind of see what happened from one time frame to the next time frame. The next thing is, Omar, is you're going to act, right? So in this case, we're going to say that we're going to use one simple, useful action, right? And the key here is useful. It's got to be useful. So we're going to take the example of the soil is too dry. Okay, soil is drying out too fast. I need to add mulch, right? But did I check the emitters nearby first, right? Did I fix the emitters? All right. Was all that done beforehand? So this goes back to the observe thing. We want to make sure that we're doing that very well. And then we're going to pick one thing. In this case, we're going to put compost on top, right? And we're going to say we're adding compost to slow the loss of water, right? We don't just want to say I added something good, right? We want to give it a reason. And we're giving it a reason because we're identifying what the root cause of the problem is. And when we do that, we kind of immediately think about all the other things that it could be and kind of scratch those out, or say, oh, maybe I should check that, right? So I had an emitter that was going out in one of my tomato plants, right? And I thought it was just the emitter. So I changed the emitter out, right? And I was like, okay, we're good here. And I, added a little bit of wood chips on top to kind of help retain more of the moisture. But in all actuality, what had happened is the irrigation, the 1/4-inch hose had popped out of the main hose, and it was just spewing water into the ground, but the emitter wasn't getting any of it. So I adjusted the emitter. The action that I took wasn't appropriate for the issue that I had, right? And the issue that I had was that it wasn't plugged into the main line. So make sure you're testing your things when you actually get those things, when you actually take an action, right? So the next thing we're going to do after we take that initial action that fixes the problem that we've identified, right? We're going to figure out a way to measure it. And usually the measuring is, again, taking that picture, coming back in a day, coming back in 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, right? To say, okay, is there anything new that's happened, right? And then we say, we make an adjustment. So Omar, M is going to be, we're going to measure. So we're going to take a picture, we're going to come back, we're going to check things to see how things have progressed. And then if we see things, either more damage, less damage, right? The water is holding, the soil is holding more moisture, the plant is rebounding, then we're going to adjust. Now the adjust is based on the evidence that we've already received, right? And that evidence is, in this case, yes, the soil is holding moisture. So if the adjustment to the emitter and plugging it back into the main pipe was the issue, then we don't have to adjust anything else. Everything should be good the way it is. We're going to continue to repeat what we have been doing, monitoring, right? We're going to take action, and then we're going to measure to make sure nothing changes, and then we're going to adjust as necessary. But let's say the plant isn't doing any better. Now we have to go back and adjust something. So that emitter that we put in and we plugged back in, was it clogged now because, it popped into the soil and we just popped it back in? So could dirt have gotten in there and clogged that emitter? We want to make sure that we adjust that, clean that emitter out. Also, maybe the emitter wasn't just adjusted correctly. Maybe it wasn't putting out enough water, or maybe it was putting out way too much water, right? So we want to make sure we make that adjustment. Once we do that, we just want to repeat that entire cycle all over again. So Omar comes back, right? We're going to observe. We're going to take an action, a specific action, right? One action. Then we're going to measure whether the action that we took did anything. What happened, right? Did it get better? Did it get worse? And then we're going to adjust anything if we need to. And then once we adjust it, we're just going to repeat that entire process over and over again. And that's kind of how I like to go through Omar. That should probably be its own post and all together. But what does progress actually look like? I think sometimes gardeners often miss the progress portion of it because we're always looking for that final result. You know, we planted the seed or we got the transplant and we're always looking for that. This is what I'm looking for. Yay. That's that's the goal. Whatever, you know, the neighbor was growing, that is the goal. But we have to take into consideration that our conditions are different from our neighbor's conditions, right? And this condition in the yard might be different from that condition in the yard. So all of this plays into factor of like, what does progress actually look like? One of the best ways to kind of look at this is progress starts small and then it starts growing and getting bigger and bigger and better, right? So progress might start underneath the soil where you don't see anything, right? But then you might see new leaves popping out, and then you might see more branches, and then it'll start getting better and better, right? And ultimately, you'll get to a point where progress is very visual and you can see all those things going. But sometimes the best way to measure progress is just to see if things have stopped. Like, has it stopped changing colors? Is it no longer turning yellow? Has it stopped turning yellow? Right? Have the dead leaves stopped? Right? This is also progress. Right? Sometimes we just want the green and we want the lush and we want things to just immediately bounce back. But sometimes, like I said when we explained it at the beginning, there's things occurring that we don't see underneath the soil, right? And there might be more damage than we actually know. So it takes time. So one of the best ways sometimes to measure whether we're progressing in the right direction is, did the bad thing stop? Because if the bad thing stopped, then we're actually making progress. We just can't see it, and we have to give it time. And one thing I would like to kind of leave you guys with is that one of the biggest mistakes is not always choosing the wrong product. The biggest mistake is usually judging a good action before you've given it time to actually work, right? You got to give it time. Again, if you're working with organics, a living soil, right? The soil food web, it takes time. I tried it, right? Is a lot of times what gardeners have said. I've tried that. I've tried that. But sometimes once isn't always the same as following the process, right? I've tried worm castings. I've tried mulch. I've tried compost. I tried it once. It didn't work, right? Adding compost once is good. Just like adding mulch one time is good. But maintaining that mulch is maintaining the system, which is better. Adding water one time is good. But continuing to water on a regular basis is a lot better, right? Just like the same thing I could say with worm castings. Adding worm castings once is good, but adding them on a regular basis is even better because we're building and supporting a healthy ecosystem, the soil, the living soil, and we're supporting it over a longer period of time, right? We're helping that system build, and we have to, right? You can check the plants once. You can check your plants once, but it's probably better if you check your plants more than once, right? Throughout the entire growing season. This goes back to, healthy choice meal, one of those healthy choice meals that you can get from, the grocery store. That's a good choice. But a healthy choice meal plan for 3 months, 6 months is a better option because the goal is to lose weight over a longer period of time. The goal is to grow happy, healthy plants for a longer period of time, not just that instance. So we have to remember that we have to be consistent. We have to be consistent. The main ideal here is that when we see something occur in the garden, we have to kind of restrain ourselves and say, okay, it's a bad thing, but like, let's see what one thing I can do that will actually fix this thing. And then once we actually do that thing, then we're going to make sure that we can come back and check on it regularly to make sure that something is occurring. And when we do that, then we have to make the adjustments, right? To whether we do more of that, we change it, or we leave it alone. And then we keep repeating that entire process, right? We go back, we look, we do something, we take an action, right? Then we monitor it, then we adjust it, and then just repeat the whole thing. And that is going to help you be a better gardener. That is going to make you consistent. And consistency is what the nature likes, that's what the soil likes, and that's what your plant likes. They like consistent access to water and nutrients, right? We like consistent access to our refrigerator and our pantry because it keeps us fed, right? And your soil is no different. It's not different. It's the exact same. Well, that's all I really got for you guys this week, and we'll see y'all next week.